My fiancé told me I was too insecure to handle his female best friend, so I put the screenshots on the projector at our engagement party. I'm 30F. My fiancé, I'll call him Ben, is 32M. We were engaged 6 months. Most people knew us as a steady couple. We'd had the usual little nudges of trouble that couples get. Canceled date nights, vague work calls, him getting defensive when I asked where he was. At first, I tried to shrug it off. You don't want to be the person who makes every text into a crisis. Ben framed it the way people do when they don't want to answer. You're being insecure, he said more than once, with a tired smile that was supposed to be charming and ended up condescending. I have a female best friend, Rachel. You don't have to freak out about everything. Rachel was in our circle, childhood friend, same university, the sort of person who'd been at 100 group dinners. I liked her at first. She was funny and sharp and great with Ben's terrible movie puns. Immediately, the female best friend part made me more careful about how I worded things. I try to ask calmly. I try to trust, but patterns accumulate. The thing that finally made the iceberg visible wasn't a single text or a lipstick smear. It was a handful of moments that didn't line up. Ben would say he had a late client dinner, but there would be a social post from Rachel an hour later with a dark photo from a bar he'd never mentioned. He'd be tagged somewhere, then tell me he'd been home. Once I opened a shared cloud album to find a picture of Ben and Rachel sitting too close on a hotel couch, his arm around her back in a way he never put around me in public. He told me he'd been in his hotel room on client calls alone that night. Every time I asked, he rolled his eyes and said I was being dramatic. You need to trust me, he said. You're reading into this. The phrase reading into this became the emotional bully that shut down real conversation. Friends started saying things like, Ben's a good guy, don't be jealous. When his mom whispered in my ear at a barbecue that every girl needs to pick her battles, the guilt pile grew. I could feel the story being set. Me as the insecure fiancé, him as the reasonable man who's somehow inconvenienced by questions. So I stopped asking in the moment and started gathering context. I did it quietly and only with what landed in my hands. Screenshots people accidentally forwarded to me. Receipts that showed he'd been out later than he'd told me. A passed-along DM that someone in a group chat screenshot and sent to me with a caption, is this Ben? I didn't hack his phone. I didn't break into accounts. I kept what came to me by error or by neglect. I made a timeline. I wrote down dates. The pattern felt ugly, and the quieter I had to be, the louder it seemed to echo in my head. Months passed. He calmed when I pressed sometimes. Then the little things slotted back into place. He promised counseling once, and then stopped going. I was tired of being the anxious girlfriend in other people's shorthand, and I was tired of my questions being the story instead of his actions. The tipping point was when I realized we'd been engaged for half a year and his female best friend had shown up to 2 weekend trips with him that he'd told me were work-related. Those 2 trips were nights away at the same boutique hotel, where I had receipts that didn't match the client list he'd given me. I thought long about how to handle that. Public shaming felt petty. A social media ambush would be messy and ugly and might backfire. I wanted a moment that would change the narrative. Not a spectacle, but a quiet presentation of facts to the people who'd been repeating the "you're insecure" line. I wanted the friends and family who judged me to see the same receipts and messages I'd been staring at alone. If Ben could make my questions look irrational in front of people, I'd make the facts available to the room where he was most trusted. We had our engagement party scheduled for a Saturday evening. Family, close friends, Ben's parents, my sister, the group that had cheered when he proposed. It would be full of people who'd heard me labeled insecure and jealous. I booked a projector under the guise of a slideshow of our photos. A friend who runs AV helped me set up, so it looked like a normal part of the night. No one except 2 friends knew the real plan. Update, the day of the party. I won't pretend I wasn't terrified. I arranged the folder on my phone like a professional. Dates, receipts, screenshots with senders' names visible. A small map showing hotel check-ins next to calendar entries where Ben claimed to be at client dinners. Nothing inflammatory, nothing hacked, just evidence that formed a timeline. Guests filed in. The room was warm and loud with hugs and the clink of glasses. Ben was radiant the way he always was at celebrations. Witty, funny, perfectly at ease with his crowd. People hugged me and told me how pretty the venue looked. Every laugh felt like a small pressure in my throat. At the appointed time, my friend said a few words and clicked the remote. The slideshow began with cheerful photos, our engagement shots, him with his parents, the usual sugar. People cooed. Then, after a natural pause, I asked for a moment to say something. No drama. I simply said we'd made a life together and that I wanted to share something factual with the room. The screen shifted. The first slide was a calendar entry he'd put as client meeting, and the next slide was a hotel receipt with the same date and a timestamped 2 hours later. Then a screenshot of a DM from Rachel reading, Last night was perfect, winky face. I still don't know why that screenshot ended up in a forwarded group, but there it was. Slide after slide matched his work night claims with photos of him and Rachel in locations that didn't sit alongside conference calls. Ben's smile dropped like someone switching off a lamp. He tried to laugh it off, and mouths fell still. Someone said a single sound. Oh, and you could feel the room recalibrate in that quiet way where everyone is deciding how to look at this. He stood up. You can't do this, he hissed. These are private messages. He looked at Rachel, and for the first time, she didn't look comfortable. She shifted, a small fidget that read like someone who'd been caught by an audience she'd never intended. No, I said calmly. They're the things that were in our lives. I didn't want to make a scene. I wanted people who've said I was being dramatic to see the dates. That's all. Ben accused me of violating his privacy and humiliating him. His mother, who'd been one of the louder voices about picking battles, put a hand to her mouth. A few people rallied for him because the simple story is easy and because social loyalty is real. But the slide deck lived on the wall, factual and quiet. He left. Not dramatic. He walked out like someone who wanted to avoid an argument, but his head was low. Rachel followed a minute later. Nobody chased them. The party continued, but it was not the same. Conversations that used to be light felt measured. Some people left early. Someone came up to me and hugged me and murmured, "Thank you." Someone else said nothing and gave me a look that was half pity, half anger. Update. The next morning, the messages came fast. Ben texted me calling me hysterical, saying I'd ruined his reputation and our engagement party. He texted friends, his sister, his coworkers, trying to reshape the story. Those messages are taken out of context, he wrote. You don't know what it was. That is the playbook people use when they don't want to acknowledge patterns. His mother called me and sobbed in a way that asked me to feel guilty. Why would you do this at the party? She asked. Why not talk privately? I explained. I had tried privately, and his version was already the quick and tidy one people chose to believe. I told her I owed it to myself to stop being cast as a crazy fiancé. The fallout was messy. Some people cut ties immediately. Others came around once they'd had a quiet conversation with me. Rachel's boyfriend. Yes, she had a boyfriend in the same town and had been seeing Ben on the side, called one mutual friend and said he needed to know everything. He later posted about being too hurt to speak. Friend group split. Ben posted a rambling message that tried to be contrite but also threw blame on miscommunication, which didn't land well for anyone who'd seen the projector. Ben begged privately to talk, to fix it, to make it right. I sat in a living room that morning and listened to voicemail after voicemail and let myself be practical instead of performative. I needed to know if he meant repair or if he meant to control the narrative back again. His words felt like recycling. Update. 3 weeks later. We did couples therapy, partly because I wanted to be fair to the relationship and partly because if we were going to move toward marriage, we needed a scaffold to hold us up. The therapist's office is a small neutral room that makes both people speak in turn, and that format exposed details that neither of us had been able to get into in the rush of the party. In sessions, Ben admitted to emotional closeness with Rachel and to some physical contact. He said he was ashamed and that he had been using her attention as a way to avoid dealing with things. He did not perfectly mend things. True repair is a season, not a weekend. He stopped seeing Rachel in the gaps we could verify, and he asked for a clear contract, transparency, couple check-ins, no secret meetings. He said he wanted to make our relationship a priority. I wanted to believe repairs were possible. I wanted the child I might have in the future. I'd been, until then, imagining kids with him, to have a stable home. But there were other ripples. Family members who'd rallied for him now had to relearn a version of him. Friends who'd laughed at my insecurity had to account for their quickness, and my trust had been punctured in a place I couldn't ignore. We tried for a while. He attended therapy. He deleted the private chats I couldn't look at, and he showed up in ways that were small and real. Texts during the workday, booking weekend blocks where we weren't available for anything else, showing up early for family events to prove presence. For some time, those efforts absorbed some of the anger. But secrecy leaves architecture. I kept replaying the projector on the wall, not like revenge, but like a record of the pivot. Every time I saw a pattern of omission, the wound flared. I resisted saying yes back to a life where I might be quietly sidelined again. Final update. 2 months later. 2 months after the projector, we called off the engagement. It wasn't a dramatic last fight. It was two people sitting across from each other and being honest about what they could live with. He asked me to try a longer course of therapy and more time. I told him I didn't want to spend the rest of my life negotiating whether someone else's attention was acceptable. I wanted a life where the default was not to justify the person I loved. We both cried. We signed the paperwork that unpledged us officially to each other's futures. Friends fractured. Some stayed, some left. Rachel moved away from town soon after, which removed one complication. Ben and I divided shared things and set up a custody arrangement for the dog with alternate weekends. Yes, that's a thing. His parents called and apologized in private after they'd had their own reckoning. I accepted apologies where they were sincere and kept distance where they weren't. Would I have preferred another path? Of course. I would have wanted quiet repair and a lifetime where I trusted my partner without evidence to the contrary. But putting those messages on the wall gave me a version of the truth that people couldn't just rewrite with a rumor. It stopped being my private worry and became a shared fact. Now I'm living in a smaller apartment with a plant that refuses to die. I'm dating casually, nothing urgent, and I'm not apologizing for the nights I feel suspicious or the evenings I don't. The projector night is a thing that happened. It changed the room. It cost relationships. It cost the cozy narrative people preferred, and it gave me closure. That's the end.